Hey everyone, it's Andy Kushner with The Wedding Biz, in which I conduct in-depth and revealing interviews of icons and those I feel are the next generation icons of the weddings and event industry, all to provide you with education and inspiration. Speaking of inspiration, if you missed last week's episode, it is a must-listen. It was with Mauricio Kirchner, the founder and chief designer of House of Kirchner. Today's guest is Barbi Walters, founder and one of three principal designers with Lynden Lane, a multi-generational brand led by strong creative intuition, known for event and interior design. Barbi, Lynn, and Lyndsey have decades of combined experience creating thoughtful environments, and again, both with events and inside the home. Enjoy this conversation with Barbi Walters. Well, Barbi, you are the original founder and principal owner of Lynden Lane, and I'm wondering how you came to form the company and how long ago it was.
We formed it 12 years ago, and we joke, I'm embarrassed to say, we were one of those families that when Lane, one of the other principals in the company, and my daughter got married after the wedding, I was like, I think we could do this. So you always get those brides and their moms who say they think they want to run it as a business, but we really did. And I'd owned three other businesses. This was my third. And I felt like at the time, no disrespect to all the amazing planners and designers out there, but there was a little bit of a disconnect on what I thought events could be run like and how they were being designed and managed. So I was like, let's see what this world looks like. So I started diving into it about 12 years ago, 13 years ago.
So that's interesting. So what did you do before it? What were the companies that you, or what did they do, the companies you owned?
Sure. I owned a real estate company for a lot of years. And then I owned a marketing company that was for real estate agents, a nationwide marketing company. And it had gotten to be a big company with, 50 or more employees. And I wasn't doing what I loved doing, which was design and putting together programs and things like that. And so design's always been near and dear to my heart. And so I felt like, I'm ready to go out and try something else. And this was one of the first things that I've ever done. And I've done a lot of things that I was like, this is a home. This is where we should have been the whole time.
Oh, wow. Well, it's interesting too. I mean, you mentioned it was a marketing company. I mean, what a great skill set to have this marketing experience that you can obviously apply to Lynden Lane.
It's definitely been very helpful. And also being a business owner of a successful company, I think helped set us apart a little bit or helped us grow Lynden Lane, and that we had a real strong business side of it besides the design and our aesthetic. And you need both, especially in these last few years.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. I've mentioned this before on the podcast. I mean, the balance between being an artist and being a business person. I mean, it's two different parts of the brain. And I found it for myself. I have an entertainment company. And for the longest time, I found it I didn't enjoy the business nearly as much, and I wasn't the best at it. I mean, I now have a business partner who's stronger at that side of it, so it's more balanced. But I remember, and I've said this before too, there were some planners, designers who I'd spoken to. One had put it, I thought, in a really good, he framed it this way. He said that he feels that creating business structure is a creative act. Like he thought that was one of the ultimate creative acts.
It is. It really is. And it has a lot of the same foundational principles. It's not as much fun, doing spreadsheets and talking about business plans and all of that, but being creative in how you see the world through a business lens is really helpful. And it is something that I actually enjoy, and seeing an opportunity like, this is a missing element. Like, how can we do this? Where do we see this business going? So it's been helpful.
Yeah. Oh, that's such a better way. Well, your website talks a great deal about designing custom structures and essentially transforming spaces. And at the top of your homepage, in a large font, you write, Lynden Lane Company is sought after for architecting transformative events and designing interior spaces. I wonder, if you could say more, or what you can say about the importance of environment for any event and how you approach it.
Environment is huge for us. And again, that's why we started doing this business is we felt like you needed to create environments and spaces that were authentic to wherever you were. So you weren't changing it necessarily, obviously ballrooms and things you do, but that you wanted to create a space that felt as if the most elevated version of if you had a home, let's say in Palm Springs, what would that, and you're so fortunate to be able to entertain 150 of your best friends there. What would you want that environment to feel like? How would you want to move through that space? How would it sound? How would the lighting be? All of the senses that need to be touched in designing a space, because you're not only, I mean, obviously we're very visual in our business and it's, pretty flowers and all those things, but really a full transformative event takes somebody out of where they're at and transposes them, into a different world. And how do you create that feels true? Because you don't want to feel thematic. We never want our events to feel thematic or, that style. So you're really looking at where we're going to be holding the event. It's funny when we're talking to clients, they're always like, well, what's it going to be like? And we're like, we don't know yet because we haven't created it. It's still in our heads, but we need to start with where's it going to be. And then from that, we start building on that based on the couple and the families and their stories and what the property's like, where does the light come in? What kind of music are we going to have? All of those things start informing our decisions as much as what it's going to look like as far as, color palette and all of that.
Well, and how, I understand that global travel for you really heavily inspires your designs. Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, we love to travel. It makes the world such a better place, I think. I actually, when I was my childhood, my dad was Air Force, so we traveled and were stationed in different places. And I lived in France for several years and traveled. And you just start to see, like we were just in Paris, you just see architecture that's different than what we're about, how they layer textures and textiles, how they use spaces is different in different parts of the world. And so seeing that and then being able to translate that into an event is really challenging and really fun, part of the process. So I think travel and culture should inform all of our decisions, whether it be for events or not. So we're big fans of that. And just, every time you go to a different place in the world, you're just like, wow, this is so amazing.
Are you like just taking tons of pictures everywhere you go and bringing them back and showing them to the team, that kind of thing?
Tons of pictures. Yeah. Fortunately, somebody from my team, and as I've mentioned, Lane and Lyndsey are co-founders and they're my daughters as well. They're usually with us or one of our other team members to take pictures because I'm notoriously suck at it. So they'll be like, great, Mom, that's a great picture of the corner of that table. It's like, oh.
Right. Oh, you get to just lay back and enjoy. You don't have to deal with it.
I just let them do it because I'm like, oh, I can't find my glasses. What are we going to do? So, somebody else is usually taking the pictures. I'll be totally honest about that, but they do a great job. And we're taking pictures. I was just at a meeting yesterday and went into the restroom and called my assistant. It's like, come in here and take pictures of this honed stone that they used in this vanity because it's freaking amazing. So we're constantly looking for inspiration everywhere we go. And we're the kind of people that we drive through neighborhoods like, wonder why they chose that paint color for their door. I wonder why they did that. That would have been better if they our brains are constantly looking at how things are put together.
And you mentioned, you've been doing this as a business for 12 years. How has the event and or home design changed since you started the company? And how do you evolve to stay relevant?
Oh yeah, that's always fun. I think you always have to evolve, but it's changed a lot. 12 years ago, weddings were, and even 10 and probably close to that, were much more formulaic, meaning like everybody did the same. You did your ceremony, an hour cocktail, then moved into a ballroom. And then, and it was just pretty, and you had this type of floral if you had this budget, and everybody was drawing from the same pool, if you will, of rentals and things like that. I feel like in particular in the last, we always were in this direction, but I feel like the whole industry's this way as well now, is much more custom, much more, they don't want to necessarily do everything that in the same order that everybody's always done it. There's a really funny meme out there right now about brides wanting to do something different. And they're like, oh, we're going to backflip down the aisle and we're going to do all these things, because you do have a lot of people that don't want to fit into the constraints of what was considered a standard wedding formula.
Yeah, traditional. Yeah.
And now I feel like we never get a call that isn't for a 3-day event, that isn't a welcome rehearsal, wedding, welcome brunch, whatever that combination may be, a minimum of 3 days. And that's regardless of budget. Like everybody wants that, and everybody wants a destination, it feels like.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, I mean, because like in my local market, I mean, it's interesting. I mean, it tends to just be Saturday night. Maybe there's a brunch, maybe on Sunday. When we do destination weddings, of course, with destination, it's definitely a long weekend. And I'm even finding, like for the quote unquote rehearsal dinner the night before, that we even end up providing music and entertainment, and they're dancing. It's a different vibe. It's a different kind of, we want to get something different. But I'm seeing obviously a lot. It just seems like more and more is starting to go on for these destination weekends as well.
They are very complex. Often our welcome parties are, minus obviously a ceremony, are as complex in some ways as the wedding. And you do want them, just exactly like I said, you want them to have completely different personalities, the events, and how you're orchestrating them. So it's often really fun. The welcome party can be a lot more creatively free, because people are like, oh yeah, let's just, it's their wild side personality, we always say.
Well, it's more casual too, in a sense, right? They're not all dressed up formally.
Yeah. And it's like, they can be fun. They're like, oh, I always wanted to do whatever it is, a big hairband or whatever. They want to do something more like of their funky personality. And I always say the wedding is more of their elevated, elegant side. So the welcome parties can be really fun. I actually really enjoy putting those together.
Yeah. So not that there's a definite formula, but generally speaking, what is your process for weddings in particular with clients, so that you can then come up with an inspiration for design? Like what is the process? Do you have a certain way of doing things?
Oh, I wish I could nail that down for you, because I feel like each client's so different. You think you have a process, then you get a new client. You're like, well, that doesn't work with them. That's not how their brain works. It's usually, we spend a lot of time getting to know them in the beginning. Sometimes if it takes them a long time to find a venue, we get to know them a lot through that process. But the beginning part is a lot of investigative work, and just, like we scroll through their Instagram for hours. Like, what is it they like? What is it that's resonating with them? And often it's just some random thrown off piece of information in a chat that we're having. We did a big wedding in Pasadena a few years ago, and Lane was talking with the bride, and she happened to mention, while we were having lunch, something about transfer wear and how much she loved it, because her grandma used to serve her lunch when she'd come to her house on it. And Lane took that, and it really became a big part of the design, the color scheme, how we integrated it. And then she found antique transfer wear all through, different First Dibs and antique stores. And we had it all throughout the wedding, on the bars in different places. And then we gifted it to the client at the end as a gift. So it's often something that you can't have a formula for. You just have to be open and listening to where that moment is, where that client says something that resonates with them, that you can feel like they get a little misty, or they look off, or there's some clue that you're like, oh wow, that's really important to them. And if you can weave that in such a way that almost that they are just like taken aback by it, but it's not so in their face, which is our favorite thing, is we don't want things to slap you upside the head. We want them to reveal themselves. It's very emotional, and that's what good design is. It's emotional. It pulls at you, So the process is, we get to know them, we look for the places, we start, and then, we do the, initial mood board, like, are we on which has nothing to do with any weddings or whatever. It can be all sorts of random imagery from travel. We actually ask our couples not to send us any weddings as inspiration.
Yeah, right.
Because we don't want to see anybody else's wedding. So we want to see, like, where do they love to travel? Where do they eat? What's their favorite furniture stores? If they like museums, what kind of museums do they like? Anything that's not wedding related to help pull up the inspiration. And then we do our mood boards. If we're on track for those and they say, yep, we love this vibe, then we start building out the design and what it's going to look like. Yeah.
It has to be so exciting when you're having these conversations and they say something where you're like, that's it. That's one of the,
Oh, it's the best. It's the best moment. And sometimes you're like, damn it, they haven't said anything yet.
Right.
That's really like triggered me. So you keep looking for it. But eventually if you listen, which is, always a tricky thing to do. If you're really listening, you'll notice they keep saying something. We have a client that keeps talking about a tree. Finally, I'm like, this tree is super important to these people. Like, how can we integrate that into what we're doing? So, it is fun when you get the aha moment. And, the best is, and I'm sure you've heard a million designers say, and the best is when you get to reveal it to the client and they see it and they're like, oh my God, this is amazing.
I want to make sure that you're aware of two other shows that are on the Wedding Biz Network. First, The Business of Being Creative, hosted by founder and president of The Business of Being Creative, Sean Lowe. Sean's consulting firm is focused on providing practical advice to those in the business of being creative. Tune in every Tuesday to hear a new episode chock full of topics and advice for creative businesses. Also, check out the 2 seasons of Stop and Smell the Roses, hosted by the one and only lifestyle and event design expert, Preston Bailey. Preston speaks with such an honest voice. I know you're going to thoroughly enjoy hearing him on this unique platform. You can find both shows at theweddingbiznetwork.com or on your cell phone's podcast app for both The Business of Being Creative and Stop and Smell the Roses. I want to come back kind of more to the business side. I'm aware that you've built various revenue streams and brands. So in terms of business development, how do you approach building, these new streams of revenue and expanding your brand?
Yeah, definitely. I can talk to it in general, that coming from the business world and also not being a spring chicken in this business, I'm like, okay, we need to move this along. This process can't take 30 years. I don't want to be doing this for 20 more years. How are we going to do that? As I said, we love all things that revolve around design. And weddings are amazing, but you can only do so many of those a year unless you want to be a bigger company as far as like, where you have 18 planners that are, junior planners and that, which is a great business model. I just don't want to manage that many people. So, there's only a limited number of clients that want to do these big production events that take us to different parts of the world. And we love it, but that's not enough to sustain or doesn't have a legacy. With weddings, the second you stop doing weddings, you're out of business. Where there's other things that you can be doing in the design world that have legs that will continue on beyond you showing up every single day to do an interior. And we'd always been very involved in interiors, more from, again, just that we loved doing them and that I had done them for myself and I'd done them for friends. And when that opportunity started showing itself, when clients started saying, would you do my house? I was like, that's really interesting. And then as all of us during COVID, a client called, and actually it's very funny. The client didn't hire us for their wedding. And at the time said, but I want you to do my house. And I was like, well, that was just a really nice way of letting us down. And, and then a year and a half later, she called during COVID and said, I want you to do my house. And we did. And it was amazing, great experience. And it just grew from there. But immediately I was like, okay, what else can we do? What other brand deals can we get into textiles? Can we get into what other elements go with this that would continue to grow and create a business that runs not passive income, because nothing's passive, but isn't so much, so maybe not as service and oriented as weddings, but it's still related because we love the whole process of weddings so much. So that's why we started interiors as its own division under Lynden Lane. And it's really interesting. We get crossovers I've had house people now that want us to do their weddings, and wedding people that obviously, I have two houses going right now that were previous bridal clients.
I mean, obviously they're connected. It's design and yet different, because you're talking, again, interior design versus wedding design.
Right.
And they have different client life cycles. Like, how do you balance that between the two businesses?
Yes. How do we keep all those balls in the air? They are different. So we separate the processes in our company separately. So one's running, they're running parallel to each other, but weddings have a shorter life cycle, and the fact that, when you're done with a wedding, you're done with it. And it's usually, I want to say usually it's 9 months to a year. It seems like it's all over the board now, but somewhere it's either like a really long lead time.
And sometimes less than 9 months too, these days.
Yeah. And sometimes it's like 3 months, like, oh yeah, we need our wedding next. And you're like, oh wow. Okay. But it's usually within that year. Let's just use that as an average, where interiors, especially when we're doing whole house, remodels, guts and that type of thing, that's a 2-3 year project. Sometimes depending on the complexity of it, or at least 18 months. So you have to allocate your resources differently, and interiors don't end. That's one thing that's like, I have clients from 3 years ago that are still like, oh, we decided to do the pool house. Oh, we decided to do, whatever it may be. So it continues on where, you don't typically get that in weddings. So we're just managing that from two separate entities within the company, but with one ethos on how we approach the whole process. Because again, at the end of the day, we're creating a space for them, whether it be the space that is their home and they want it to be beautiful and elevated and where they relax and where they come home to. And I always say they want to walk in the door inside at their home, or we're creating a wedding or a space that we also want them to walk into and feel transported, and to feel permanent in that temporary situation. So for weddings, we're trying to create a sense of permanence in our design that feels lasting. And then in interiors, we're trying to create environments where they're going to live with their families and all of that. So they have some very parallel paths, but it's a great combo. It really is. I've talked to other designers who are like, I'm like, I highly recommend it. And they both keep each other lively. They both keep each other. You said, how do you stay relevant? It's really helpful for both, because if you follow interior design, it really, you start to see the trends that are in interior design. You start to see them transfer over to weddings, and vice versa. Doing things that are more playful for weddings sometimes is really fun to incorporate something like that into your interior space. So they inspire each other, and they keep us all really like cool. Like sometimes the girls are working on a wedding and they'll have something going, and I'm like, oh, where'd that fabric come? They're like, oh, we're going to use it for a table linen. We got it from Schumacher or wherever. And I'm like, oh, I want to use that fabric. I've got the house going over, so there's a lot of natural crossover.
Well, also just like, having diversification in an investment portfolio, to have diversification in your business, to have multiple streams of revenue. That's, especially during downturns in the economy, whether it's a pandemic or it's a recession or something like that. Obviously that's a good way to stay, to stay healthy from a business perspective. But how do you staff a team to handle these two different businesses, again, yet connected? I understand your daughters do both with you, but generally, how do you staff a team to do all this?
So the Lane and Lyndsey, my daughters and partners, are primary designers. So there's the three of us that are involved in anything that has a look or style to it, regardless of what it is, we're involved in it. And then on the wedding side, we have an event producer, an office manager type person who does all that. And then another event producer, assistant event producer who work with us full time. And they are salt of the earth women. I couldn't ride this crazy rodeo we're in without them. And they just keep everything going. But then we work with a lot of independent contractors when we start putting together the weddings. I think that's one thing that you asked earlier about what business had changed. I feel like when COVID happened and then the economy was weird and all the things that have happened to us over the last few years, a lot of really good producers sadly left their main companies and are now independent and work for multiple planners. We all, share them, but it's a great business model. It's a great business model for them. And it's a great business model for us as planners and designers, because now I'm only staffing when I need it.
Right.
I don't have I'm in a downtime and now I've got this huge payroll and all of that. We book a big production wedding. Okay, we're going to need 3 event producers on this at this level. We're going to bring in X, Y, and Z. And then they work on that. And then the wedding's over and they're gone until we need them for something else. Or maybe a different team works better on another wedding. But so we use a lot of independent contractors to fill out our staff. As I said earlier, I'm not interested in having a giant team. I've done that. It's great for some people, but that ends up being your full-time job and you don't get to do the part that you fell in love with. And then, on the interior side, I brought on an amazing, she's very young and so freaking smart, but, I brought on an amazing woman, a little over a year ago to help with brand deals. And then she came to help me with interiors while we were growing. And I haven't let her leave my site. I call her my external Google Drive. But eventually I'm going to have to let her go back to brand deals and bring on another assistant on interiors and I'll probably bring on a junior designer to help. There's a lot of legwork in interiors that there's not in weddings. There's lots of, going to design stores and sourcing things. There's lots of out of the office wandering around time. That's a little harder to bring on an independent person. So we'll probably have to staff on that side, but not too much. Like I said, I don't want to end up with more than 10 employees total.
So Barbi, what you're doing so much, what's the hardest part? Like, what do you still struggle with, even at this point in your career,
Everybody struggles with all the time. If you're not struggling, you're fibbing to everybody.
Yeah, there's always something. Sure.
There's always something. And you're always, I think, continuing to grow a business in a way that feels, I think the word authentic is so overused right now, but that feels authentic to you. Like, yeah, we want to grow our business, but we always want it to feel like Lynden Lane felt a long time ago when we started. So growing a business, staffing, and then just managing. Everyone says it, but it's been like this year is very different in weddings than it was last year. It's a different booking cycle. It's so constantly being willing to say, shit, I don't know how to do this. I need to figure this out. I need to change that. But I think that's a healthy, my dad was a pilot and he, flew for years and years and years as a jet pilot. And someone said, oh, you must, know everything. And he goes, oh no, the day I know everything and I don't have anything to learn is the day I climb out of this cockpit and never get back in. And I think that's a good method to keep in your head when you're growing a business. The day you think you know everything and you don't have anything to learn, you should stop.
This makes me think too. I think it was Keith Richards from the Rolling Stones, I think, who said something like, I'm not grown up until I'm 6 feet under. Or I haven't learned everything until, I haven't, something to that effect. Yeah. I love that. constantly to the end.
It's true. You gotta always be like, I just signed up for a new class. I'm taking Babbel to upgrade my French. Like, you constantly have to be looking for what you don't know and how you can be better at it. And plus, I think that keeps you relevant. And it also keeps your brain working really well. And the more you expose yourself to new things, the better you are at your job and life. So yeah, balance, we have, Lane and Lyndsey, have 5 kids between them under 9. And so I have 5 grandkids. Well, I have almost 7 now. And
wow.
I know. We have a full house, and we built the business when I started the business and asked the girls to come in with me. I always wanted it to be a business where, that would be a legacy for my family and my kids, but, that was centered around how do you make it work to be a successful business woman and have a family and do that. I don't believe in balance. I don't think balance because balance means that everything's equilibrium, and that's never the case. You're either one side or the other. And we embrace that one day, we're full on, we're gone for 2 weeks to Paris, in deep with work. And the next week we're at a flag salute or whatever is happening at the school for the grandkids, or they have minimum days. So they're in the office, and our clients know that about us, that's our life, and we embrace it and we talk about it. So, it's just a crazy world, but you want to create that environment that allows everybody to grow and have a family and, all the things that are also important. So having balance or having family time. I mean, when we went to Paris, we ended up bringing, Lane's 7-year-old daughter on a whim. We had the best time with her.
That's
She was
sweet.
so funny, and was like a trooper. So it was great.
Also, Barbie, I've interviewed Natalie Denise, the founder and director of In Good Company PR, and I know her firm represents your company. And so many, there are numerous planners and designers who have considered, or actually hired, but have considered, should they have a PR firm? It's a big decision. It's another, expense commitment. Why did you choose to do so? And what are your goals for doing so?
I'm a big believer in that process, whether it be brand management or PR. We've had a brand manager in various levels, but since we started, a girl cold called me and started talking about Instagram when it was just starting, and we hung up. And I said, Delane and Lyndsey, I have no idea what she was talking about, but I think we need her. And she now is she's in total charge of all of our brand management, but she started just as doing our Instagram, because she was really clear about what our voice was going to be and how we were perceived. And it's hard to do that for yourself a little bit. And then a year ago, maybe a little bit longer ago, she's the one that said, I think we should look at a PR firm. And we had heard about Natalie before. And actually we tried to work with Natalie, but we couldn't because she had somebody else in our same space. And so when she came available and we were ready to, and because we were growing the interior side too, and we wanted to eloquently tell that story, we just sat down and looked at the numbers and figured out how we could make it work. And it's amazing. Like, they're so good at looking at what you do every day through a different lens and articulating that to the clients and to the world in a way
that you just wouldn't think of.
No, you wouldn't think of. We're too busy doing life.
Yeah. Too much inside of it, I would say.
Yeah. And then also, I don't want to say it sounds egotistic, but it's weird to look at yourself that way. Like, I would never write some of the things about myself that they write about. So I was like, oh, damn, we sound good. But because they're looking at it from the outside in, when you're looking, we're always our own worst critics. So when you're looking to write something about yourself, you're not quite as glowing as they are. But no, I am a big believer in you have to invest in what the growth of your company is going to be, no matter what. And, all of us have suffered growing pains, and, we're in a growth phase again, and you're constantly looking at everything. But if you're not feeding what got you there, you're going to starve. You're not going to keep going, and your business will die on the vine. And I'm not interested in that. So we just always have fed from the top.
And lastly, you mentioned earlier that you think it's a great thing for an event designer to also get into home interior design. What would you advise an event designer who wants to expand into home interior design? Like, what's the most important factors to consider to be able to make that switch?
Right. I think for a lot of wedding designers, it would be to find a project, where the client already trusted you, already did their wedding.
Good point. Yeah.
Yeah. So there's already that trust level because you're learning and they know that you're learning. So they're not, expecting certain things from you.
Right. But you have this relationship already existing. That's a brilliant idea. Yeah.
And maybe start small. I mean, I jumped into the deep end, but I have a little bit of a construction background from owning a real estate firm. And so I'm very good with spaces. So it was that part for me is easier, but start with they got married 2 years ago and they're having a baby and they want you to do their nursery. You can do that. It's not different than putting together a room at a wedding. You're doing textiles and doing that. If you want to get into whole house remodels and things like that and gutting kitchens, that's a different skill set. And you do have to learn that or find that. So, but there's a whole market out there. I mean, we're in whole house world and we love that because I love the ripping out a kitchen and putting a new one in. But there's a whole world of just interior design, interior decorating, which is different than design, that you can do. And you could probably start getting a revenue from it, fairly easily, especially with your existing clients. Yeah. I'd love to do your baby's room. I'd love to do your office, whatever.
Yeah, that's such a great way to go about it, to break in. Well, Barbi, this has been really wonderful. I mean, a whole lot of information in a relatively short period of time. So I appreciate you taking this time. I mean, it's so good to get to know you more. Thank you.
No, I really appreciate it. And thank you so much. I've listened to you for years, so it's exciting to be on.
Aw. Oh, great. Oh, fantastic.
Yep, you got me through COVID. I listened to all the podcasts over and over again.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, thanks for saying that.
Thank you so much, Andy.
Thank you for listening to my conversation with Barbi Walters. Be sure to check out their website, which is lyndenlane.com. That's LYNDEN lane.com. On Instagram, you can find them at Lynden Lane. And please check out the show notes with event pics that our guests provided in your cell phone's podcast app or at our website of theweddingbiz.com. And be sure to check out next week's episode, which is a revisit of my original interview of Pablo Oliveira, president of Nuage Designs. Also, finally, be sure to check out Preston Bailey's show, Stop and Smell the Roses, and Sean Lowe's show, The Business of Being Creative, both at theweddingbiznetwork.com or by the show name on your cell phone's podcast app. And finally, if you could subscribe to The Wedding Biz on Instagram, and we'll catch you next week.